We will now continue to look at Revelation 18, where we were looking at the fall of Babylon. And the last time I was highlighting the fact that the rest of the chapter is probably going to be a little tedious going through it, and you will see why when you come to the chapter, because it just goes over. Let me go to the chapter. It just goes through some little details about, how people respond to Babylon being burned. But I'm going to go to the book of Jeremiah and just point out something that maybe most of us already know what I'm going to point out. Well, let me point it out anyway. The last time we saw that there was an angel that came down from heaven, and he called God's people to come out of Babylon, because Babylon has fallen. And we were pointing out the fact that what this is saying is that God's people are to come out. It's referring to these last days, but it is borrowing from the language of the Old Testament what happened to literal, physical Babylon. And I want to just go to Jeremiah 51. And I want to look quickly at, look at what it says here in Jeremiah 51. And you will see that God is almost quoting from the Old Testament. Look at what God says here. Verse 37, Jeremiah 51. And Babylon shall become heaps, a dwelling place for dragons, an astonishment, and an hissing without an inhabitant. If you look at Revelation chapter 18, no, it's up further. It says, Babylon has become the habitation of devils, and the hold, or the hideout of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Both Babylons, the old Babylon and the modern Babylon, they have this in common, that they have become a dwelling place for unclean and unwholesome things. Dragons, dinosaurs, and an hissing place without any inhabitant. Go down a little further. It says in verse 44, and I will punish Bel in Babylon. Bel was one of the gods of Babylon. And I will bring forth out of his mouth that which he hath swallowed up, and the nations shall not flow together any more unto him. Yea, the wall of Babylon shall fall. Here, Babylon is referred to as a him by God, but in Revelation it's referred to as a her. Small details that don't really matter. But notice it says the nation shall not flow together any more unto him. And it ties in with what God says in Revelation, that the waters were dried up. Now see what God says in verse 45. My people, go ye out of the midst of her, and deliver ye every man his soul from the fierce anger of the Lord. There God calls his people out of Babylon. Now you know that this was the time when there was to be a literal coming out of Babylon. Babylon was a place. Babylon was a place, and God's people were literally captives in Babylon. So when God says, my people go out of the midst of her, he's calling on every Jew that was in Babylon to escape and to physically move to some other place, to go back to the land of Canaan where they belong. And if you go through this passage and other places in Jeremiah, you'll find many of these similarities. Let me see, I'm not even looking at the key chapters I wanted to look at. Let me see. Let me see if I can find a few other references that are more striking. Jeremiah 50. It says, therefore the wild beasts of the desert with the wild beasts of the island shall dwell there. And it's these two chapters, 50 and 51. But there's another place where it talks about the golden cup she has, that God has given her a golden cup to drink out of. Let me see if I can find that one. Jeremiah 52 and verse 11 says, depart ye, go out from thence. Touch no unclean thing, you that go out of the midst of her. Over and over, God is highlighting the fall of Babylon. It says in Jeremiah 50 and verse 8, remove out of the midst of Babylon and go forth out of the land of the Chaldeans. Over and over. So anyway, the main point I'm making is that you can see that there is a parallel between the destruction of old Babylon and the destruction of new Babylon. God is showing us this parallel. Now, what is the difference? The difference is that in one case, God is looking at a physical place and a physical situation. In the other case, God is looking at a spiritual situation. And that is a challenge we have when we come to the book of Revelation. The language is the same as the language we find in the Old Testament. That's one of the things we looked at. The language of Revelation is the language from the Old Testament. And what we have to do, as we have said over and over, we have to look at the images that are given to us and we have to apply them in a New Testament way. All right, I have to turn on my fan. Anyway, let's go directly to Revelation. Just having made that point, let's go directly to Revelation 18 and let's pick up from where we left off the last time. Last time we saw that this voice calls God's people to come out from her, and that those who remained would be partakers of her sins and would receive her plagues. And we looked at the point that modern Babylon consists of the great false religious system that envelops the whole planet. So we're going to go through fairly quickly, I believe. God says, reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she has filled, fill to her double. And again, there's a place in there. In Psalm 137, look at what it says. O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewarded thee as thou hast served us. Same idea in the Old Testament, that Babylon is to be repaid for the way she did to those who were God's people. Jeremiah 50 and verse 29, look what it says. Call together the archers against Babylon, all you that bend the bow, camp against it round about. Let none thereof escape. Recompense her according to her work, according to all that she has done, do unto her. For she hath been proud against the Lord, against the Holy One of Israel. All right, is somebody? Sister Nathalie, I think you're making noise. Let me mute you. All right, so anyway, I think we won't look at any more of the parallels. I think you have gotten the point. And that is kind of like what we see throughout the rest of the chapter. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. In other words, in the same proportion as Babylon has exalted herself as a great entity, made herself queen of the world, in that proportion, God is going to bring her down. For she said in her heart, I sit a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Now, let me just make a quick comment here. In the same way she glorified herself, you are to give her the same degree of sorrow. How would I explain this? It would be like let us say, for example, you know that some people might not like this example, but you know that Donald Trump has just become the president-elect of the United States and he's to take up office sometime early next year. But what if this man who is so rich and so elevated and exalted, what if tomorrow he loses that office of the president-elect? What if tomorrow, for some reason, he is found to have some terrible crime against his name, and at the same time something happens where he completely loses all his money and he becomes a pauper who has to walk about on the street and beg and to eat from the garbage? This is something like what God is saying will happen to Babylon. To the same degree as she has been exalted, to the same height that she has been taken, let her go down to the dust. And this is why I believe that what God is saying is that all the wealth of Babylon is going to be taken away. All the reputation of Babylon, all the influence of Babylon is going to be overthrown. In a very short period of time, this institution that has been riding high with the kings and the presidents and the high places of the earth is going to come down almost overnight. Something like we saw in the recent pandemic where almost overnight everything changed. One thing that we learned from that situation is the ability of things to change suddenly. Most of my life, the things that I saw change, they took place over time. You know, it was gradual changes. And I mean, I've never lived through a world war. There were two before I was born, but I've never lived through one. I've seen wars, but the most drastic change I ever saw was during that recent so-called pandemic. But it gave us a template so we can understand how quickly things can change. And what we are seeing in the Bible, that is that the fall of Babylon will be something like this. One day Babylon will be riding high, and the next day, or in a very short while, she's down to the very gutter, something that was on the high places of the earth. And you know my belief that Babylon represents the religious systems that dominate the world. I mean, primarily are chiefly apostate Christianity with Roman Catholicism at the head of it. So where do they stand today? They are highly influential. If you can think of any institution that is global, right around the world, and that has close ties with the political entities of the world. Now I know that I've heard people say that Zionism is a great influence in the world, and of course I believe those who say it has a strong impact on the American system of government and the American way of life. I can't disagree. I don't know much about it, but I think the evidence is there if you look at it closely enough. Other people will say that somebody else was saying that Mormonism has an equally great impact. I don't know. I don't know much about those inward runnings of things, but I say when you look at the global situation, if we step outside of America, Europe, and you go to the entire planet and you ask which universal institution has the greatest impact on the way political systems and governments operate. Now, the first thing you might say is that there's no universal system because different countries have different systems. And in a way, you would be right. But there's something that is different but similar everywhere, and it is religion. It's different, but it's similar because you have different religion in India. The strongest religion is maybe Hinduism, and in some countries it is Islam. In most of the world, it is Christianity, so-called. But the common, regardless of the branch of Christianity, the common element if you talk about a power that impacts the politics and the governmental system of the world, I would say that the strongest element, I think, in every country in the world is the religious system. Now, if somebody can point out something else that is equally universal and equally influential, I will bow to your greater knowledge. But what I can see and what I think about is religion. So this is 90% of the reason why I believe that Babylon really refers to religious institutionalism, religious institutions. Yes, Brother Ken, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, I put up in the chat that there's quasi political organizations. Some of them are tied to Rome, like the Club of Rome or different organizations like that that have great political influence, and they affect or influence policy all over the world, just like the WEF, the UN, a lot of the UN agencies. I mean, this is just a recent time kind of thing where you're starting to see this, um, the shadow machinery of the world, the curtains being pulled back, and you're seeing not only on the religious side. The religious side has always been out there, but I think that the geopolitical stuff has been more hidden, and it's starting to come out now. I don't know how much it plays into this. I agree that Babylon is the is a religious system. Whether these other players they more play into the beast system, but they definitely have equal influence in my mind around the world.
All right, and while I acknowledge that, Brother Ken, but I will respond by saying the other thing to be considered is that Babylon is a system that is millennia old. Babylon is not a modern phenomenon. Babylon is riding the seven heads of the beast, and so to really identify Babylon, you not only look for a universal institution, but you look for something that has been around from the beginning, yet closely allied to these powers of the world throughout all the ages. And so, you know, some of the entities that you mentioned would be disqualified from that perspective because they are modern phenomena. So, yeah, when you put all the elements together, the only thing that really, some people even identify Babylon with certain cities, which, as far as I'm concerned, is disqualified by the same argument. You know, Paris, London, Rome. When did those places come to be? And yet Babylon has been there from the very beginning, riding on all seven heads of the beast. So clearly, Babylon is an entity that spans millennia, and that is pretty much universal. And I think that is why we can zero in on institutionalized religion. All right, somebody taking over my screen. Yeah, I don't know how
It
that.
just it just came up and said that Brother Michael was now the presenter.
All right, I think GoToMeeting made a mistake. I'm the presenter. All right. I think I opened the room that anybody can share, but I didn't anticipate that happening. Anyway, so this fall of Babylon, then, in my understanding, and what I think is logical, or we can conclude, is that Babylon rides as a queen. She is a consort of kings. She is the paramour of kings, if I may use another word. And for those who are not English, paramour or consort means a girlfriend, if you want to put it that way, or a lover. She is the paramour of kings, and so she has been the institutionalized churches, religion in general, has been exalted to a high place in this world, and even among Christianized entities, even in America. Okay, why are people like Kenneth Copeland, Benny Hinn, and so on able to become so rich that they can have 3 jet planes? Why Joel Austin can have a congregation, own a stadium where he keeps his worship services? They are basically tax-free entities. They are riding high, and it is because they are hand in glove with the political powers of the world. The Church of Jesus Christ was never in bed with the political powers of the world. They were always poor and pure and persecuted until they became the friends of the world, right? The Caesars were hunting for Christians to throw them to wild beasts and to murder them. They were not looking for them to be friendly with them and to allow them privileges like they do to these institutions today. So these 2 entities, organized religious systems and the state, they are hand in hand. They are in bed together, to use another terminology. And the thing is that the consequence of what happens to Babylon, I believe the only way you can understand it is that Babylon, these religious institutions, they lose everything in one moment. Everything is taken from them. And they are, I mean, it doesn't mean that the governments are going to kill all the people. No, it means that the institutions, that's why I'm highlighting the institutions are going to lose everything, their influence, their money, their property. Babylon is going to be looted and pillaged, raped if you want. She's going to come to nothing. And God says, in the same degree to which she exalted herself, bring her down to that depth. So she's coming down. And we talked a little about this the last time, because this is what persuades me that the last political power to dominate this planet will be an atheistic power. Definitely, it will be a power that is completely against religion. That's why they will do this to Babylon. And all of us can cast our minds to what happens under extreme communism. I think in North Korea at the moment, in North Korea, I believe religion is illegal. Or if people can practice it at home, definitely it's not allowed. You are not allowed to meet in worship places or to propagate your faith in any way at all. I'm not quite sure how things are there, but I know it's the most blatant form of pure atheism in a state that maybe the world has seen, or maybe that exists at the moment. I know that under the old Soviet Union, in my understanding, maybe I have some images that are wrong. People like Sister Helena and the others from that side of Europe will have a better idea. But definitely religion was badly subjugated. They took control of the worship places, and not sure if they took away the property from the churches. But I know in places like where there is strong communism and probably strong atheism, you will have things like this. And so this final condition of Babylon is a reflection on the condition of the world at that point in time. So they turn against Babylon, and they turn against Babylon so completely because they have come to the place where there is a hatred and a rejection of God. And I keep saying, anybody who has his eyes open today and looks at the mood that is in the world, with all due respect to Donald Trump and the Republicans, Donald Trump and the Republicans represent a 50% of America. And it's a triumph that the religious system and, well, institutionalized Christianity, let me put it that way, it has gained the dominance for a moment. But this is in America. In the rest of the world, I don't see things going that direction. I see, and even in America, this, in my opinion, is a transient victory. And we will see what happens. We will see. But at the same time, the point I'm making is that the world is heading in a direction consistently, step by step, incrementally by incrementally, where God is becoming irrelevant to the planet. The world is in a stage where I don't know if it was in this place before the flood, and maybe they tried to do it at the Tower of Babel. But the world is at a place where it has never been in the history of this planet, except maybe during those two times, because we don't know what it was like before the flood. But look here, they have technology where they are controlling the weather. They have taken such control over human health that people in places like the developed countries, Europe and America, you take it for granted that every time you have a little sniffle, you go and you take a pill, or you go to the pharmacy, or you go to see the doctor. Every little thing, you have a bump on your arm, the doctor. I mean, to somebody like me who lives in the third world, it is amazing that every breath is about the doctor. Sometimes the thought that comes to my mind is, why don't they just die? Instead of just allowing people to carve and cut them up into little pieces, that thought comes to my mind sometimes. But maybe that's just my perversity. But look, the world has come to the place where the education system is breeding. It's breeding atheism. It's breeding evolution. It's spouting it out, and all the evidence that is presented is just fading away. Nobody wants to hear about God anymore. Anybody thinks the world is becoming more religious? What dream are you living in? The whole planet. And the thing that, what is the word? The thing that emphasizes it, exaggerates it, blows it up, is the technological brilliance of this generation. Robots. They'll soon be making robot wives and husbands. Maybe especially robot wives. They'll soon be making these, right? The technology of this age is promising to eliminate God. So, who dreams that the world is going to turn back? Are they going to turn back? Are they going to go back and step back from their technology, their YouTube, their Facebook, their Twitter, their TikTok, their Instagram, their communication, their movies, their everything? Are they going to go backwards? I was just talking to the brother who was here, and he was saying he can't watch TV anymore, and he can't watch movies anymore because everything that happens, they are introducing the gay lifestyle. There's always something in there about homosexuality. Every time there's something in there about science fiction. The minds of this world, the minds of this generation are being programmed to believe God is a fiction. Even among people who were Christians, the idea is beginning to breed and to predominate that God is a fictitious character, irrelevant. The world comes to the place where God becomes irrelevant. I pray and I ask God. I pray and I ask my Father to let me deal with Facebook and YouTube and these other places the way they deserve. They're not taking over my life. Because this is what this generation is doing, infecting and taking you over. You become addicted to the internet. You keep going from one video to another, from one post to another. God just kind of drifts in the background. Sometimes you even claim to be a Christian, but your mind is feeding on all the excitement and all the technology and all the things that are happening. This is the way the world is going. And if anybody thinks that the world is going to turn around, we are dreaming. This is why God thought it good, our Father thought it good to destroy the antediluvians. Why he thought it good to stop the building of the Tower of Babel. And this planet is at that place. The next thing that happens is not another flood, is not another Tower of Babel. The next thing that is to happen is the end of everything. Because while all this is happening, the purposes of our God have been and are being fulfilled. This generation finally, in the midst of this extreme darkness and this extreme humanism, I think I can see with my eyes there is the developing of something that is more than what God's people have been in the recent past. Something that is more. An understanding of the Word of God, an understanding of the deep things of God, that for me is a positive sign that God is doing something in the midst of this extraordinary darkness. So it is terrible times and it is wonderful times. I think it was Charles Dickens who wrote, when he wrote about, what was it, the French Revolution? I think it was something like that. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Never has that been more true in this planet than in the age in which we are living. And so Babylon is going to be taken down. And we can see behind the screen, right? The people in the institutions, they don't see this. The people in Babylon, they don't see this. But if you take the Word of God point by point and begin to examine, you see the whole history of it laid out. Babylon is riding high, the world is drinking from her golden cup. But God says she's coming down. And you can see why. It's because the world is stroking Babylon's cheek while they are trying to destroy her in another way. The same world that is pampering these religious systems is the same world that is promoting atheism and that is promoting the destruction of the knowledge of God that will eventually lead to Babylon's destruction. They are stroking her on one side and destroying her on the other. It will eventually culminate in the fall of Babylon. It says, therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine. And she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And like we pointed out last week, Babylon, God says that he judges Babylon and he burns her with fire. But you know, God doesn't do it. The strangest thing is that God says that he has put it in the heart. He has put it in the heart of his great enemies, the 10 horns. He has put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree to give their kingdom to the beast so that they can turn around and destroy the woman. God uses his enemies to destroy his other enemy. It's very interesting. So it goes on to say, and the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. Now this is the part where everything, I believe, is giving us an overall picture. I'm probably not going to go into details here. The last time we did this, I took the same course, and I'm going to take the same course again. And let me explain what I mean. Especially in these kinds of prophecies. I know we have talked about this before. I'm going to say it again. I see that there are some hands. I'll take you in just a moment. When we look at these prophecies, what we do, sometimes we are given a picture, a screen to look at, and what we see in the screen. If I showed you a picture of a city, and I showed you that there were fires burning over the city, and there was a sword hanging from the sky over the city, and I asked you, what do you see here? One person will say, well, I see fire, I see houses, I see a sword. That's what one person will say. And somebody else will say, I see a city being destroyed. You might say, which of these is correct? And somebody might say, both of them is correct. But I would say, the person who says, I see a city being destroyed, I would say that person is more accurate. Why? Because there are clearly some things here that are symbolic. For example, the sword hanging from the sky. That would not be literal. The fire may be literal, but the overall picture is giving you a statement. A city is being destroyed. Now, many people, when they come to this prophecy about Babylon being destroyed, they try to put a meaning to every single detail. And I believe that this will lead to confusion. I think what God is doing is giving us a big picture, and what we are to look at is a picture of total destruction, not the details. For example, when it says that the kings of the earth will throw dust in the air, are we to try to give that a meaning? When somebody is throwing dust in the air, it just means that they are suffering deep regret, deep pity. It means that the powers of earth, when they see the destruction of Babylon, they regret. It means that Babylon's downfall is something that everybody sees, and it elicits different emotions all over the world. So I'm suggesting we don't try to interpret every detail of what we are looking at. We look at the big picture. All right, so I'm going to come back to just a moment. Let me take Brother Michael and then Brother Ray.
Can everyone hear me?
Very loudly, Brother Mike.
Okay, wonderful. And sorry about that screen share for a moment. I wanted to show my Bible app, and I didn't realize it would take over your screen at the same time. So apologies. So I was reviewing Matthew 24 and the Olivet Discourse with Jesus, and how when he talked about there would be earthquakes, famines, pestilence, ethnicity rising up against ethnicity, all of those things were leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, and they did, literally occur. In the book of Acts, there were earthquakes. In also as well, there is a scene in Acts 11:28, and there stood up one among them named Agabus, and signified by the Spirit that there would be a great dearth or famine throughout all the world, which came to pass in the days of Claudius Caesar, which is between 40 and 50 AD. So all the things that Jesus talked about did literally occur in that time, but it has typological significance to the end of Babylon in AD 70, because you had mentioned it before that Jerusalem was a type of Babylon in that time as well. And what I noted is that during that time, the famines, the earthquakes, the Emperor Nero actually used that as justification to kill a lot of the Christians. That's not explicitly recorded in the Bible, but that's of historical record. And I wonder if, like, that period of time between AD 30 and AD 70, if that's a picture, an illustration of what will be coming at the end of time on a much bigger, because that literally occurred between AD 30 and AD 70. The spiritual, the antitype application of it around the world on the big scale could be in the form of some terrible travesty occurring, and then everyone blaming it as religion is the source. Religion is the source of all of our struggles, all of our troubles. And I when I look at the world stage now, I can't really see any other focus on that than the conflict in the Middle East. Like, it is constantly being fed in the news to everyone. People are just so sick of it, and it's over a strip of land because of religion. It's like, that's right. The Islam and Judaism, they both have their own God, their own interpretation of God, and they both deserve this land, and that's the reason why there's so much death and suffering. And the and that's what I was wondering, is even though that's in the old world, Jerusalem is certainly located in the old world, the United States, or the beast with lamb-like horns, has a very large stake in its destiny. And that's why I just wanted to ask, do you think that could play into the destruction of religion? Is like people just seeing how ridiculous it's getting?
I think so. I mean, even though, as you say, it may be adding one and two together, I think I could easily appreciate and agree with that, because, as you say, what happened to the Jews has typological value, and there is a sentiment that you can hear everywhere. People are. I get offended because I'm a Christian. All right, I don't like to hear people attack my faith, my God, my religion. But sometimes I can understand why they describe religion as being a greedy, rapacious thing, because the people are there. The deceivers are there, the liars are there, the greedy people are there who bleed the people dry, little old widows and so on. They bleed them of every cent to pad their own pockets. And the entire thing has almost become like a gigantic scam. And the people in the world, granted, sometimes they exaggerate it, but I can see that that is a mindset. And sometimes I really wonder about even the American system. I look at the way those TV evangelists and those denominations operate. And it's a marvel to me that the government still affords them this tax exempt status and gives them liberty to do many of the things that they do, because for me it is so obvious that they are taking advantage of the system and they are scamming people, but they are protected by the system that has been set up. And so I can understand when people become really upset, not just in America but right around the world, because it's become a global phenomenon. There are hundreds, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands maybe, who are involved in religion just because it's a way of making money. And there's a loophole. There are loopholes in the governments to protect people who are in religious ventures. And so, I mean, sometimes the laws that are made, they are going to hurt the honest preachers. But I understand the sentiment, and I think you probably are right that the behavior,
Something.
yeah, so it will be used as an excuse to attack Christianity in general.
And what I notice is when studying, the days of Elijah, the prophets of Baal, they faked their miracles. That's paralleled in Jeremiah and Ezekiel as well, as that they would fake their miracles, they would fake their prophecies. And what I've noticed is I've done such a deep dive into the evangelical YouTube channels, there's this guy, the clown named Trey Smith. He says that Donald Trump is anointed by God, and that his presidency is going to, the way you bless America is by blessing Israel. Just about these false prophets is their prophecies are fulfilled on the screen, not in reality, on the screen. So Bible prophecy is fulfilled in reality all around us, but false prophets twist scripture and then apply it to things on the screen. Like you mentioned the pandemic before. I was extremely annoyed when people try to apply Matthew 24, when Jesus talked about famines, pestilence. They said, "Oh, this is what Jesus taught." I was like, that is not at all. That's what you're seeing is on the screen. I'm like, that's not what Jesus is talking about. And that's like, and yet, of course, those real interpretations of scripture are always drowned out by.
You're breaking up though, brother Mike. I think we lost.
Sorry. I hope everyone can still hear me. But yeah, that's basically what I'm putting forth, is that the intensity of false prophets is going to increase, and it will lead to people just ultimately, the whole world just throwing it out. And I've talked to you about my theories before about America. I guess, okay, this is the last question I had before I go on, is in Daniel chapter
We lost you again.
4 with Nebuchadnezzar, about how the tree represents Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And it's chopped down 7 times, and that's a parallel to the 7 heads of the beast that the woman is riding upon. In fact, the verse you went over about how she sits a queen, Nebuchadnezzar had said before he went crazy, the king spake and said, "Is this not great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty?" I read that, and that very much reminded me of the woman who sits a queen and is, will never be a widow, and is and then immediately destroyed as a result of it. And that's what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. Like, he said that, and then he went crazy for 7 years. But the tree that's chopped down 7 times, I'm reading what it says here in Daniel 4:23. "And whereas you saw, the king saw a watcher say, Yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field." So the tree is cut down entirely 7 times. It's cut down 7 times. But the band of iron and brass is what's left. It's like this that's left on the tree. So it's totally chopped down, but there's like this band of iron and brass that's left. And I think I've talked to you about before. Iron, of course, represents Rome. Brass also has a connection to the house of Israel. If you go later in Ezekiel, right? Brass does have a connection to the house of Israel. And it's the only thing that remains. So Babylon is like totally destroyed. In Revelation, we see that the beast with lamb-like horns makes an image to the old world. Now, it's not necessarily to the woman. The image is not made to the woman. It's made to the beast, right? I just wonder, do you think that last basically what I'm asking you, what do you think that last band of iron and brass, what do you think that represents?
It's a difficult question, because for me to suggest something, it would mean that I would have to be thinking along the same line that you're thinking, that this experience of Nebuchadnezzar is applicable to the overthrow of Babylon. And it really was something that happened to Nebuchadnezzar personally. And yes, it probably has some prophetic symbolism. But I think it may be, I'm not sure if I would say that it applies to the overthrow of Babylon, because Nebuchadnezzar is in Babylon. He's not Babylon. And while he's going through this experience, Babylon is still existing. So we know what it meant literally. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom was safe to him. But what does Nebuchadnezzar the person and the 7 years, the band of iron? I am not sure. I can't present an answer, because I have not thought along that line as to what that experience in particular represents.
No problem. Thank you, Brother David.
All right, Brother Mike. Brother Ray, go ahead. Sorry to keep you waiting, but
It's okay. I'm going to try to make it really very, very short, keeping it meaty, like they say. So throughout your illustrations, we have come to the conclusion that America is going to make an image to the beast whose head was wounded. Okay, so my question is this here, because it has to do with this, with what you're teaching now, Babylon. So when America makes, according to the studies we had, okay, that you have been teaching, so when America makes an image to the beast, uh, does this mean now, because this is in the European side, I don't know if I'm correct on this. This is why I'm asking you. If I'm correct, if I'm not, please correct me. Okay, so he makes, the United States makes an image to the beast, which is the European power. So now this European power goes into power. There's an image made. She comes back to life, and this was the beast where it was first introduced into the world, and it fell because its head was wounded. So my question is: so when the Bible talks about Babylon, that great city has been destroyed, and the merchants cannot buy it, and people, cry over that, whatever. Um, does this mean is this the city Babylon that's going to be destroyed? And what happens to America? Because I understand that America is one of the most powerful, richest countries. Although right now we're struggling, we are in debts. We are really struggling with the economy. So if Europe is the one that is going to be the image made, right? Stand as a beast, and it falls down. Are we looking at Europe as a power at the very ending of time, and all the other countries suffering because of it, or wailing?
yeah. No, Brother Ray. Let me just very quickly kind of put those four things together. There are four things you ask about. There's a beast. There is the false prophet, sometimes called the lamb-like beast. Those are two. The third thing is the image of the beast. That's something else. And the fourth thing is Babylon. So you asked about those four things: the beast, plus the second beast, the two-horned beast, the false prophet, plus the image of the beast, plus Babylon. Four things. Now,
Right. So I'm wondering.
yeah,
But just to make my question more clearer to you, so I'm wondering if Babylon is that that image that's made that's given life
No,
in Europe.
no, it's not. It's not. That's what I'm going to explain. So there are only two beasts, right? But there's an image of one of the beasts. That's a third entity that we mentioned. Now, what is this image? The image of the beast has to do with a system that is set up in America. Remember, America is the second beast with the two horns, right? The first beast, let's put the first beast one side for a moment. That's the European beast. The second beast is America. And this beast is the one that has two horns like a lamb, but it looks like a dragon. What America does is America sets up a political system within America. This political system is made to resemble the political system that has existed in Europe. The political, the philosophical system, whatever we want to call it, but the kind of system that has been in Europe over the ages, where it was persecuting, it was intolerant of God's people. America establishes a system like this in America, and this system is what is called the image of the beast. It's not America as such. It's a system that is set up within America that becomes the image. So it's America within itself sets up a mirror of the European beast. So that's the image of the beast. Now, what is Babylon? Babylon is something separate. Babylon is the religious powers around the world, the religious organizations, institutions that have been linked to the governments and the kings and the states and so forth, that have been constantly a major influence on these powers. So Babylon is something different. It is not it's not political, except that it is having an affair with the political powers, right? Babylon is what will be destroyed. The beast and the false prophet will remain until the coming of Jesus, but Babylon will be destroyed by the 10 horns. What about the image of the beast? The image of the beast is not something different. The image of the beast is a part of the second beast. It's a political system set up within the second beast. So when the second beast continues to survive, the image survives within that beast until they are destroyed at the coming of Jesus.